Imagine sitting at a restaurant, enjoying your dinner, when suddenly three men surround a well-dressed stranger and things turn violent. People look away, waiters freeze, and fear spreads like wildfire. But then in just 15 seconds, one man stands up. He's not rich, not powerful, not famous, just a single dad, a Navy veteran, carrying his daughter's backpack at his side. What happened next not only changed the life of the CEO being attacked, but also revealed a truth about courage, sacrifice, and the power of ordinary heroes. Stay with me, because this story will leave you questioning what you would have done in that moment. It was a Friday night in New York City. The glow of neon lights spilled into the polished windows of a well-known Italian restaurant. Inside, the aroma of garlic bread and roasted meat filled the air as conversations hummed, forks clinked, and glasses touched in cheer. At the corner table, Michael Carter, a billionaire CEO in his mid-50s, sat quietly. He wasn't celebrating, nor was he with anyone. For once, he wanted peace away from boardrooms, bodyguards, and endless phone calls. Success had given him everything: wealth, respect, power, but had stolen his privacy. Tonight he wanted to taste normalcy. But normal didn't last long. Three men walked in, rough in appearance, their eyes scanning the room. They weren't there for dinner. They moved toward Michael like wolves circling prey. Within seconds, their voices grew sharp, and one of them grabbed the CEO's collar, pulling him from his chair. Silverware clattered to the floor. The restaurant froze. "Where's our money, Carter?" one shouted, slamming a fist against the table. Panic spread. Diners turned their faces, pretending not to see. Waiters backed into the kitchen, whispering about calling the police. But no one dared to move closer. And then, just 15 feet away, Daniel Hayes, a broad-shouldered man in his late 30s, looked up from his modest meal. He wasn't in a suit. He wasn't wealthy. He was just a single father, sitting with his 8-year-old daughter, Emma, who was quietly coloring in her notebook. Daniel wore an old Navy jacket, faded and patched, a reminder of his years serving overseas. His instincts kicked in the moment he saw the men. The fear in the CEO's eyes wasn't unfamiliar. Daniel had seen that same fear on battlefields, in villages where civilians were powerless against armed men. He whispered to Emma, "Stay here, sweetheart. Don't move." Then he stood up. At first, the attackers didn't even notice him. But within 15 seconds, everything changed. Daniel's voice cut through the chaos. "That's enough," he said firmly, stepping closer. The men turned, surprised. They laughed at first, mocking him, asking if he wanted to be a hero. But Daniel's eyes were steady, his posture unshaken. He wasn't just another diner. He was a man who had carried wounded soldiers through gunfire, a man who had seen death and refused to bow to it. The confrontation escalated. One of the thugs lunged at him, but Daniel blocked the strike, twisting the man's arm and forcing him to the ground with military precision. Another rushed forward only to be pushed back into a chair with a crushing blow. The third hesitated, fear flickering across his face as he realized this wasn't an ordinary father. Within moments, the attackers scrambled, defeated, and fled the restaurant. The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the restaurant turned toward Daniel, the single dad who had just risked everything in front of his daughter. The CEO, shaken but unharmed, struggled to find words. He looked at Daniel not as a savior in uniform, but as something far greater, an ordinary man with extraordinary courage. Police arrived minutes later, but by then the chaos had settled. Daniel had gone back to his table, kneeling beside Emma, making sure she wasn't scared. She smiled at him, small and proud, whispering, "Daddy, you were like a superhero." For Daniel, that moment meant more than any medal he had ever earned. The CEO approached, still trembling. You saved my life." "Michael Carter," said, his voice breaking. He wanted to offer money, protection, something, anything. But Daniel shook his head. "I don't need money," he said. "Just make sure the people working for you, the ones who don't have power, never feel like they're invisible. Courage isn't just about fighting men like that, it's about protecting the ones who can't protect themselves." For Michael stood silent. For the first time in decades, someone had spoken to him not as a billionaire, but as a man who had forgotten what it meant to truly care. That night changed him more than any deal ever could. News of the incident spread quickly, but Daniel refused interviews. He didn't want fame. He wanted to go home, cook dinner for Emma, and remind her that heroes weren't people on magazine covers. They were fathers who stayed, men who loved deeply, and people who chose to act when others stayed silent. As the story ends, imagine yourself in that restaurant. Would you have stood up or looked away? Because sometimes in just 15 seconds, a stranger can remind the world that true strength lies not in money, not in status, but in the heart of an ordinary hero.